The President of the United States is about to be murdered. Security rushes to protect him, but then violence erupts as the killer makes his way to his target. In any other comic book, the hero would stop the assassin and save the day. But in this comic, the main character is the assassin. This is Scout, the insane story of an American Indian on the warpath to kill his enemies. I am the Magnificent One, a lifelong comic reader, and today we're looking at Scout, a tale of one dangerous Indian. This is one of the greatest independent comics that came out in the 1980s, and here are 9 things you need to know about Scout. This one's going to be a wild ride, so let's get started. Number 1. End of America, Beginning of Visions. When series creator Timothy Truman published Scout in 1985 under Eclipse Comics, he created a future America that has collapsed into something resembling a desolate third world nation. The US is impoverished, resources are disappearing, the government is increasingly authoritarian, corporate interests control enormous portions of the country, and ordinary people are simply trying to survive. Then, Emmanuel Santana enters the picture and things change. He's an Apache Indian and former Army Ranger who served in the military program known as the Schoolboys to be one of the best trained killers in the US government. But then, Santana walks away from the army one day and, well, kinda goes insane. He starts receiving visions from an Apache spirit called God, who shows up in the form of a chipmunk. Yep, that's right. The chipmunk's message? Santana has been chosen to hunt down 4 very evil men controlling America. It's like a Native American vision quest in the middle of a Mad Max movie. So now Santana, who is now going by Scout, sets out on his cross-country murder spree inspired completely by a rodent. And soon this post-apocalyptic action story turns into a political and spiritual nightmare, leading us to our second point. Number 2, the dark secret of spirits. So Scout goes about a killing. First, a pornographer who makes sex movies. Okay, this might be a bad guy exploiting girls for sex and money. But then the second guy, the US Secretary of Agriculture, is a high-ranking government official. The third guy, a media mogul. And the fourth, you guessed it, the President of the United States. So why would a chipmunk tell Scout to end the lives of these 4 gentlemen? Was it due to their political corruption, their greed, or perhaps they were actually criminals? No, not really. It's something much darker. Well, maybe. 4 monsters from Apache mythology have returned and they're supposedly taken human form in these men. These 4 monsters are all giant man monster, buffalo monster, antelope monster, and eagle monster, all pretending to be the human form of the aforementioned men Scout killed. These monsters are hiding in plain sight of the public, leading corporations and holding political power, and Scout begins systematically hunting them down. And therefore, by the conclusion of the first major arc of this series, Scout has accomplished something almost unthinkable. He's killed the President of the United States. But then again, and here's where Scout gets really interesting, there's absolutely no proof that these people are actually monsters outside of Scout's hallucinations. In fact, in reading these comics, you never actually know if this is the truth or if Scout is just a madman with insane visions. Even Santana himself has his doubts. And the worst part is, he kills the president, but then things get worse. It doesn't restore America or stop corruption. Instead, it just creates a desolate political situation, leading us to our next point. Number 3, sex, drugs, and political power. Enter Laura Carver. Former Vice President Carver becomes president after the assassination of the first president. Things were supposed to be looking up, but then it turns out she's not good at all. She is, in fact, compromised and a drug fiend. She's hooked on the Lady H, as the kids say. She's basically a useless figurehead under the control of her now Vice President, Bill Loper. Bill is a former TV evangelist who is now the government's puppet master. He feeds her drugs, she delivers his messages. He's connected to a group called the Legion of Man, a secret organization whose ambitions extend far beyond the American presidency. Their objective is actually quite terrified. They want to manipulate the world's superpowers into an escalating conflict that will eventually lead to a nuclear war. Then when civilization destroys itself, they can step into the power vacuum and take over. Suddenly, Scout's mission gets much bigger. He's not simply hunting monsters, he's walking into a conspiracy designed to reshape the world through catastrophe. But before we go any further, there's another character caught in the middle of this we have to talk about. Rosa Winter. So number 4, Kissed by Rosa. Okay, so we need to take a second to talk about Rosa. She's what you might call the second lead in the Scout comic. She and Santana share history from the military days, and she's also an Army Ranger. Basically, they trained together and they used to bang each other, and apparently the banging was pretty good because Rosa does some downright morally corrupt stuff just to help Scout out. For instance, her military partner Raymond Vaughn is yet another Army Ranger who trained with Rosa, went to war with Rosa, completes missions with Rosa, is slightly psychotic, and ultimately is her partner in crime when it comes to all kinds of Ranger operations. That said, during the presidential assassination, Rosa and Vaughn are assigned to protect the president and hunt down Scout. But instead of helping her partner, she instead betrays him, kills him, blows him away with gunfire. His decades-long loyalty to Rosa is rewarded by a hail of bullets. Basically because Scout still gives Rosa tingles down in her nether regions. Now you could argue that she was protecting the vice president when she shot Vaughn, but it's not the only time this happens. Like there's 3 or 4 times in the series where Rosa has Scout dead to rights, able to stop him from killing or hurting people. But just because she's still hot in the loins for Scout, she lets him go every time. Speaking of hot loins, Rosa also becomes romantically involved with now President Laura Carver, creating one of the more unusual relationships, especially for an independent comic book of the period. These lady lovers go on to try and break free from Bill Loader's control, but then this eventually leads to Laura's death and Rosa's continued involvement with the violent Scout. Speaking of which, our next point really drives home a particular and important point about Scout. Number 5, Scout is not a hero. This is where I think Scout truly separates itself from most action comics from the 1980s, because Scout kills people who aren't necessarily his enemies. I mean, you're talking about like National Guard soldiers just doing their job. I mean, bang, you're dead. Agricultural work hand, dead. You're an oil worker, welcome to death. Hell, at one point he burns down a large chunk of Houston, destroying a lot of people's homes. He kills soldiers, workers, he even kills astronauts doing astronaut stuff. In one scene in particular, an army medic giving him medical aid gets killed by Scout. It's a good deed rewarded by death, probably just because Scout was in a killing mood that day. Basically, in Scout's eyes, the mission comes first and he has no empathy for anyone. This is not some sort of noble warrior, this is a fanatical survivor who in a modern wasteland is basically an apex predator killing without remorse. And maybe that's the point. A man convinced his mission justifies just about anything. Which at some point makes us stop and ask, what exactly makes this guy different from the monsters he's hunting? And while meeting Scout does mean that you're very likely to end up as a corpse, some people do live. And these people are... Number 6, The Strangely Strange Strangers. Scout is an incredibly dark story with some of the strangest characters imaginable. There's Missy, a 17-year-old girl Scout helps escape the pornography industry. She eventually goes on to become a rock star. Then there's Duty, and Duty is, he's retarded. A mentally challenged man who gets tortured by the government, but then becomes a bizarre religious prophet whose teachings incorporate Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. It seems crazy, but then his followers grow and his influence grows. And eventually Duty's movement gets caught up with nuclear weapons and the collapsing of the American government. There's also Monday the Eliminator, an immortal warrior dedicated to fighting the Legion of Man. He's kind of like this pure living weapon who actually makes even Scout a bit nervous, but who in the end kind of saves the world from destruction. And there are many others. There's Beauregard Leduc, a cattle herder with an artificial intelligent girlfriend who likes to quote John Wayne, groups of survivalists, a guitar-playing punk killer, an Israeli warrior disguised as a politician, the list goes on and on. Each one of these weirdos, they kind of do some part to help Scout along the way, and each offer their own unique stories to the reader, and in the end, they ultimately participate in Scout taking on his final battle in his last mission. Speaking of which, let's explore number 7, The End of the World. Just when you think Scout's adventures couldn't get any stranger or bigger, America goes to war. So, Mexico invades the United States with Russian backing, and Scout is caught up in the middle. Russia has emerged as a dominant global power, usurping the USA as the global leader. So international tensions explode, and eventually a global conflict expands far beyond America's borders, and Russia and Israel become the 2 dominant forces at war with each other. It starts out as international tensions secretly spurred on by the Legion of Man, but then it turns to a global struggle over the future of civilization. And that's when Scout's story intersects with the previously mentioned Monday the Eliminator. So Monday, again, he's essentially this walking war machine. He's a strange, nearly mythological warrior who becomes connected to an ancient organization called, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly, the Sumathrasans, enemies of the Legion of Man. Therefore, when the world reaches the brink of nuclear annihilation, Scout and Monday join the fight, and they're basically trying to figure out how to save the planet where the fate of the whole world is at stake. So I'm not going to ruin the ending for you, but it gets a little bit wild and a little bit crazy with one hell of a final issue. And with that in mind, let's take a peek into the creative mind behind Scout. So number 8, Tim Truman, the man behind Scout. Scout was basically the vision of one creator, Timothy Truman. So Truman, essentially, he wrote and he drew the comic itself, creating this kind of really visceral visual style that's almost impossible to mistake for anybody else. His artwork is this raw, gritty, dirty, and aggressive type of illustration where characters look better, the landscapes feel like they're almost poisoned, and America, it looks like it's actually dying. What I will say is Truman definitely shines in how he illustrates landscapes, machinery, vehicles, and weapons, probably better than he actually draws people themselves, and his panel layouts are pretty damn awesome the way they tell and form a story. And the book has something that a lot of other comics didn't have at this time, which is these beautifully colored panels. And he was using colorists like Steve Olive and Sam Parsons, and it really gave Scout an epic look to the book. As an independent book, this does something that even a lot of Marvel and DC comics struggle to do, which is it creates a truly immersive world. This is an apocalyptic wasteland, and it feels like a desolate landscape of America's failed future. You can almost feel the heat of the desert, you can smell the burning oil and fires, and taste the dust in your mouth. Scout is as close to a real experience as any comic comes to. So finally, let's take a look at our last point, number 9, themes and takeaways. Scout is about what could happen to America if it consumed its resources, gave all the power to large corporations, and eventually stripped people of their freedom through an authoritative government. It's almost as if Truman is letting us know that not only is this a possibility, but maybe even it's an inevitability. I mean, if you think about it, government grows more and more disconnected from the populace every single day. Corporations merge into fewer, more powerful entities over time, and in times of crisis, people willingly give up their sense of independence in the name of a greater cause and for quote-unquote public safety. The world of Scout may be closer than we think it is, but there's also something else in this comic. You see, Scout fights monsters. He hunts them down and he kills them. But there's one scene in the series, one panel only, that reveals something very, very sinister. Because Scout kills 4 monsters that only he can see. But when making love to Rosa one hot summer night, he reveals his true nature. Scout himself is a monster. If you'd like to read this series, first of all, it's highly recommended. It really is one of the great indie series and somehow doesn't get a lot of credit, especially not the credit it deserves. Individual issues, they can be a bit tricky to get. You can probably find a few on eBay, but what I would do is, if I wanted to read this, is I would get one of the collections. I'll put a link in the description. I would just start out with Scout Volume 1. That collects the first 7 issues, including his hunt for the 4 monsters. It's definitely worth a read, and Tim Truman has an art style that is something you're going to love when you read it. I'll also link to the complete series Omnibus. That has all 24 issues, but it's pretty expensive, so I would only get that if I was a huge Scout fan, and instead would start out with the first collection. And to be frank, those really are the best issues of the series. So the original Scout, it lasted 24 issues. It ended in this spectacular conflict that ended in issue number 24, but the character did return later. There was another series called Scout War Shaman, which continued the story about a decade later. But the original Scout series is the remarkable comic book that is a really, truly unique and essential experience. Because Scout wasn't this like polished, predictable, safe superhero story. Instead, it was a very violent, political, ridiculous, and quite frankly, it was a brilliant book. And that's why it's one of the greatest comics, and it deserves to be remembered. Thanks for watching. Cheers.